your name, please?
My name is Burton Mason.
My name is Burton Mason.
My name is Burton Mason.
I, Burton Mason, am a diver and salvage expert.
Number one, how did you happen to find the submarine that was sunk off the coast?
Well, we found this with an aero service magnometer.
Well, I'm going to eliminate number two because he looks like the commander of the German subs. Number three, how many fathoms does the Oregon, and how many fathoms of water does it lie?
100 fathoms.
Give me in terms of feet, fathoms. 100 fathoms, how many feet?
600.
600 feet.
Well, there we are. Once again, we've come to the end of our wool. Your ballots for number one, number two.
What are they doing to us tonight?
Or number three. So, will the real Burton Mason please stand up?
Welcome once again to YUH with Lisa, Phil, and Aaron. Hope you had a good trip back to California, Aaron. We haven't talked to you since you left. Aaron was here with us for a week, and he left on Tuesday. So,
Yep.
we were glad to have you.
Back to the grind.
Yep.
Transcontinental flying there.
Yep. This week we are talking to Keith Mason. Author of Please Stand Up, a memoir. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you for having me. Hello to your viewers, to your listeners. Thank you for inviting me into your living room, or rooms as the case may be. I guess Aaron he's one of those guys down in the basement that you see like for popcorn and then he goes away again.
Well, like,
I'm not sure how it works there.
We're crossing the country today because you're East Coast, Aaron's West Coast, and we are Midwest.
We're flyover country.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Cincinnati is a destination.
No, it's flyover country.
Aaron, we
Uh,
were going to order new cards with your picture.
Yeah.
I'll point the camera down so we can see what you're going to get rid of. And then next week we can get the contrast.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
Well, Keith, so your book came out a couple years ago?
It's been available for 2 years.
2 years?
Please Stand Up is in the usual places. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, and it's in places like pleasestandupmason.com. Thank you for that unsolicited testimonial.
There will be a solicited
and available.
testimonial at the end.
Yeah.
And it's self-published. When I came to the end of the writing process, the way I expressed it is 70 agents didn't say yes. So I needed to do what needs to be done. So when you self-publish, you give up things. You give up a big organization behind you, an editorial outfit and publicity and things like that. You give those things up, but you also retain total control.
That's
So
true.
I do my own work, and I do my own PR, and I do my own things,
Yeah.
and let people know where it is.
Have you tried to shop it around to local bookstores?
I do it locally. I used to work at Barnes and Noble, and I've done appearances there and in independent stores and things of that nature. I do library appearances, etc. One of these days, when something finally hits, I can do a book tour.
Yay!
But for now, the book tour is a couple of places that are within an hour of the house, and that's about it.
That's okay.
It's still a tour.
It's still a tour.
If you're going to more than one place, it's a tour. If you're only going to one place, it's an appearance.
I've got good reviews. I've got a lot of solid stuff behind it. So I'm glad it's been received well, and seems to boggle everybody who finally takes a look at it. So I'm pleased with what's there, because it did take more than 3 years to write. It took me 68 years to live. And having been a writer my entire adult, I was a writer my entire adult life, but I worked in short form. I was in public relations and things of that nature, mostly in the nonprofit sector. So everything I did was short form, paragraphs, single lines, the press releases, the annual reports, things of that nature, video scripts, radio commercials. But as far as coming up with something that's 200 pages long, that's a completely different writing animal. And I had to teach myself how to go from short form to long form, while at the same time I was living the experiences within a 3-year cluster that became Please Stand Up. I hadn't expected to write a book. I didn't plan on writing a book. I didn't have an idea about writing a book. But I sat in my basement in October of 2016 doing something, and tidal wave came through the internet, through my screen, totally changed my life and set me off on the wildest adventure I've ever had, and a lot of people have ever had, in family discovery. And I knew about a month into it, if I don't really do something with this, hey, I didn't say I'm a writer all my life. I'm the writer. If I don't do something with this, it's like dereliction of duty.
Yeah.
I had to do something with this.
Right.
And I figured when I got started, well, I'll come up with 12 pages Esquire will buy about my crazy story. And I'll give it 3 months. I'll really craft something nice, do a little magazine piece somebody will buy. And 12 pages in 3 months became 25 pages in 6 months, became 115 pages in a year.
Yeah.
Boom, boom. Because every single time I'm thinking, well, this is enough, I got it, something else would come crashing in at me. And what was happening to me in real time in my life just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the book got bigger and bigger and bigger, or the magazine article, and then became book.
Right. So, like one thing would lead to another. You would meet someone that would help you fill in the story. You know, we haven't got to what the story is exactly yet. We've alluded to it a little bit, but so didn't you teach this memoir style writing at some point? Like you took it from something you'd never really done before. And then I thought I read that you had taught some classes in that type of stuff.
I did some coursework at Temple University and taught the skills of public relations to
Okay.
senior level writing students or senior level English and communications majors, some of whom couldn't write their way out of a paper bag, but that wasn't my job to teach them that. It's my job to teach them an array of skills. But again, that was what I knew: short form PR, talking to people, getting your story in on Action News kinds of thing.
Yeah.
So when this opportunity and this demand came along, I had to do a ton of reading. I had to go back to how to write,
Right.
because it's a completely different skill set. So did a lot of reading, did a lot of research work. Again, working at Barnes and Noble as well. On my lunch break, I'm reading Stephen King on writing and 20 other books like that to try to absorb things. Because while my story is something that I could tell at the dinner table, boy, that was a great dessert. Thank you for the coffee. You got 2 hours, folks. Let me tell you a story. I could do that. And the book is conversational in that way. But I knew I didn't set out to be a great memoirist like Danny Shapiro. I didn't set out to do American history like Eric Larson. I just decided I'm going to be me. Whatever me ends up as in book form, I'm going to have to be happy with it because I'm the only one that really matters.
Well, in preparing for the episode tonight, I did watch your appearance on In a City Like Yours podcast, and that was a very good I guess synopsis of some of the content of the book. But I wonder if you could go through kind of the story, maybe just a brief overview of the story. You don't have to fill in the blanks for everyone. They should want to go ahead and get the book.
Any spoilers?
Yeah.
Yes.
As much as you would like.
Yeah, the elevator
cliffhanger.
pitch. Yeah.
Well, I'm a semi-regular guy living in South Jersey, and I never knew my father. He and my mother split up after being together for 6 months. They had some fun. I was on the way. And it just didn't work out between them. So it was just me and my mom, but I was brought up in her parents' house. My grandparents created a family for me up until I was 14, and my mom and I went off to our own apartment. So I had a middle class, white bread American, suburban, Eisenhower, John Kennedy childhood in the 50s and 60s. That was fairly normal. Didn't have a dad, and pretty much walled that off emotionally my entire life.
As we did in this, you know, Gen X and boomers.
When I was young in the early 50s, there were 3 million kids without fathers in this country, paternal orphans. It was right after World War II. It was in the middle of, and then right after the Korean War.
Okay.
Kids had their dads just go away and never come home. The fathers would leave because they didn't want the responsibility. Guys were getting bumped off in their cars at that bad traffic circle over at the Brooklawn Diner. They were dropping dead with their snow shovels in the driveway. 3 million kids had no dads at the same time I did. I didn't get a certificate for it, but I was a part of a demographic group. Time passes. I do know a couple of things about my dad that my mother provided me when I was 14. It was time to see a couple of things and learn a couple of things, which was okay. But I never wanted to really drill my mother on it. I didn't want to. She always told me, you have questions about your dad, you can ask. But I didn't want to force open any stuck doors in her life. I didn't want to have to take her back to painful things. I just let it be, put my walls up. Time passes. In the 60s, I'm getting older. In my 60s, I'm getting older, rather. And curiosities come up that you always sort of had, but you push them aside. But, oh, well, maybe I should know things just because. And these thoughts that you get when you're older about stuff from the past, now it's colliding with the internet. And the internet has everything. So in idle moments, at the end of the day, I'd have an extra 15 minutes. I'd be downstairs in the basement office. My wife would be upstairs. And I'd put in a couple of keywords because I knew about my father that he'd been a deep sea diver, a controversial deep sea diver. Off of New England, he would be going down in the 60s, diving down to German submarines that were sunk during the war. Even brought up a body once and created a lot of smoke about that because he was desecrating a war grave. So I knew a little bit. So I'd be entering his name, Burton Mason, and some keywords, diving, salvage, things like that. And one or two little tidbits did come up. Oh, there's a 6-inch article in a Connecticut newspaper about diver going down to find history. Those little things. Nothing, boom, just little things. Well, that's an interesting little, I knew that about my dad. Oh, look, there's a little newspaper blip. This process that went on for a couple of years, just in little spare moments, ran out of steam. Things that were coming back were just repeating, nothing new. Okay. And one day I was getting to the end of my rope. I don't want to mess with this anymore. I might not. I put in a couple of keywords on one night in October of 2016. Well, let's see what comes up. And the search results come up. Things that I'd seen before. But at the bottom of the search results, there was the feedback of the keywords, Burton Mason, diver, salvage, something like that. But the picture attached was this little white-haired lady. An incongruous matching of result and keywords and a photograph. Well, what's that about? What's the connection? What's this? So I click on it. And as the next page blossoms up in front of me, I know what's there. I sort of know. I'm not sure I know, but I sort of know what's there because I remember it from my childhood. There's a video screen and there's a YouTube page that's come up. And there's information written on the screen. Oh, I recognize what this is. And this is all going through my head in about a microsecond.
Right.
And I've got this feeling that something's out there in front of me. And I get that feeling like you're going out of the plane in a parachute for the first time. You're stepping on stage on Broadway for the first time. You're stepping into something that you know well intrinsically, but is a new thing for you.
Making
Sort
your
of
major
slow.
league
Kind of
debut.
deja vu.
I reach over and with my mouse, do the click. And it's an episode on YouTube of the classic TV quiz show called To Tell the Truth
Yep.
from October of 1961. And this is in 2016, this is happening.
Mhm.
And from October of 1961, there's To Tell the Truth. My father is a contestant on a TV game show.
55 years.
First time I've seen this guy face to face, walking, talking, everything. And if you're familiar at all with the show, 3 people line up in front of a celebrity panel. One person is a real person. The other 2 are imposters trying to mislead the panel and earn some money. And there's a version of To Tell the Truth still going on today.
Right. It's been
Yeah.
like
This dates
redone.
back to 1955. It's been on
Yeah.
since forever.
One of the classic
Yeah.
TV shows.
I noticed
Probably a radio
Johnny
show too.
Carson was one of the panelists.
I'm sorry?
He and I share Johnny Carson.
Well, yeah, we
Johnny
did.
Carson.
He and I share a birth date.
Johnny
We
Carson,
found-
before he was Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, as a
Yeah.
panelist.
Right.
A TV comic by the name of Tom Poston, who's been around forever.
Hmm.
Right.
And,
And all the Bob Newhart projects. Yeah.
The ladies,
Right.
I didn't recognize the ladies. But Johnny
I-
and Tom, I definitely
I definitely
knew.
recognize Kitty Carlisle. She made a
Kitty
good
Kitty
Carlisle,
Carlisle
yeah.
was a doyen of Broadway. She'd been around for a long time. And there was an actress filling in the 4th chair, somebody who'd been on Broadway filling in for Julie Andrews in a musical. So they grabbed her and threw her onto the game show.
Right.
Okay.
There were 3 guys lined up.
We did find it, by the way. So you probably figured that out by now. We
Yeah,
found it.
we watched it.
Glad you did. Glad you did. It's out there. It's available.
Yeah.
And of these 3 men, I still don't know which one is my father. I'm still working on it. I'm looking carefully at how they're saying I don't immediately gravitate to the guy who looks exactly like me. I still don't have it. I
We had a
don't
disguise
re-
on that.
I don't really get that it's him until the final call. Will the real salvage diver please stand up?
The real salvage expert. So, will the real Burton Mason please stand up?
I'm not healthy, huh?
No wonder he knew so much about wet wool, you see. Number 1.
And they do the shuffling, and one guy sort of stands, and then he sits down, and they're playing around. And finally, number 2 stands up, and I'm looking at my father in full form for the first time.
Yeah.
Not from any of the things that you would normally, millions of people are involved in genealogy. They're spitting DNA into the test tubes. They're looking on websites and research and all kinds of stuff
You find yours on a game show.
to find people. Here's my father on a TV game show, which he won, by the way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah, they won. They got to split $750, I think.
they put some money. They
Carton
got a couple cartons
in a
of
cart for
cigarettes.
Yeah.
Salem's.
Pretty much it.
Salem's, right.
I
Yeah.
call my wife down. I say, look at this. And
Uh-huh.
the line of dominoes starts tickling one after another as I start piercing together what this all means. Because now I know there's something else out there. And from this point in the story, I'll shorten up for the benefit of your audience. I discover my father, and I have to find out more. And I have to find out more. And I have to find out more. And I find out he's a sociopath. He's married 7 times to 6 women. He's been in and out of debt, in and out of jail, in and out of family matters. I got 8 siblings I never knew about.
Wow.
one of whom is an honored homicide detective in Akron, Ohio, who's been on cold case files and is just, the king of Ohio for his grand work as a cop. There's one other brother who's been living an hour away from me for the last 20 years that I never knew about.
Mhm.
A variety of sisters spread out. And then I go deeper into where this guy, Bert, my father, came from. What's his backstory? It was
Yeah.
very difficult to pin him down. I had 3 Burtons at one point. I had a Burton in Ohio. I had a Burton who was born in California. I had a Burton up in New England. And I'm trying to tease apart because all the stuff I'm finding out about him couldn't possibly be just one guy. That biography would just be too ridiculous.
Mhm.
Although in the end, it did turn out to be one guy.
Wow.
I discovered my grandfather. Because of course, my dad had to come from someplace. And I finally tracked down my grandfather, who was a crusading reporter who ended up in a dusty, dumpy Texas town called Alice, way down in the southeastern corner outside of Corpus Christi. And after a grand career in public relations, like me, and as a reporter, like me, his career collapses. A lot of things collapse for him. He ends up in this dumpy, dusty town where he ticks off the powers that be. And a crooked deputy sheriff shoots him down in the street like a lame cow because my grandfather had stuck his nose into all the wrong places, including a ballot box scandal, famous back in the day in 1948, called the Box 13 scandal.
Interesting.
Wow.
We have a friend that's an investigative reporter in a small town like that does that type of stuff.
Well, there's a local power broker who ran the whole county. So he ran afoul of the power broker. He ran afoul of the cops. He got murdered in the middle of the street.
Wow.
Over again, poking his nose into places.
Right.
Meanwhile, the recipient of that voting scandal was a young local politician who gets into the Senate for the first time, a fellow by the name of Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad.
I'm five of those steps away from knowing Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
6 degrees.
My dad since he hated Lyndon Johnson. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he just knew he was crooked. I guess maybe he knew some stories or something.
Well, I don't know. You ever listen to him order Hager slacks?
Who slacks?
Hager slacks. There's this audio of LBJ ordering slacks, and he's asking for a couple extra inches of fabric down by his ball sack.
Hello. Mr. Hager? Yes, this is Joe Hager. Joe, is your father the one that makes clothes? Yes, sir. We're all together. Now, I need about 6 pairs for summer wear. I want them a ½ inch larger in the waist than they were before, and make these a ½ inch bigger in the waist. Make the pockets at least an inch longer. My money and my knife and everything fall out. Wait just a minute. Hello? Hello. Now, another thing, the crotch down where your nuts hang is always a little too tight. So when you make them up, give me an inch that I can let out there.
And it goes on, and it's honest to God, the president talking to the president of Hager Slacks, asking for these specific pants.
Well, he talked about
every president has tapes that they'd rather they didn't have, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Johnson had hours and hours and hours of
But
tapes.
that one's just a hilarious listen.
The ballot box 13 scandal followed Johnson until the end of his days.
Yeah, we should stitch that in.
Yeah.
So here I am with 3 generations of my family, a grandfather murdered in Texas, a sociopathic father who walked out on me and my mom for 6 months. And to conclude, we could talk about this ad infinitum, but just to kind of wrap
I have some things I want to
my place in the book, just to wrap my place in the book. One of the things that I carried with me my whole life was this question that goes on in my head. I didn't think about it much, I walled it off in myself. So, of course, a therapist these days would like spent a couple of years with me working on stuff about my dad that, he doesn't affect me. I got rid of that guy. Yeah, sure.
Right.
But I always asked myself what kind of a guy would do that
Mm.
to my mom and me. He was 23 years old. Why would he do that to me and my mom? What kind of
Mental illness.
crappy guy would do such a thing?
Mhm.
And in developing this profile of my father from immense, intense volumes of research, and then eventually talking and meeting and talking to some of my siblings.
Well, that's one question I
I've got
have.
the-
I wonder when you were doing this and you were going to your newly found siblings, how receptive were they to you? I mean, did they have maybe feelings about him as well that made them think? I mean, did anyone put up walls and say, you know, I don't know if I even want to go into some of the things of the past, or did you find them to be receptive?
The first, my older brother, the cop in Ohio, was the most like me. He did have a stepfather, but he was deserted by the same guy. He and his mom were on their own for quite some time. And he was the first person I reached out to. I finally, after doing, again, voluminous research, I finally figured out this one particular guy in Ohio, which wasn't easy because his stepfather's last name was Smith. So here I am thinking, okay, well, I'll find a guy in Ohio named Smith. I mean, that's going to be a piece of cake.
Sure, that'll be easy.
Yeah.
So finally, when I kind of had an inkling of where the guy was, and again, with the internet, you can do anything. I sat through Google Maps, streetwise, street camera. I sat in front of his driveway, looking at what I thought was my older brother's house, and checking the number on the mailbox, doing all that. I finally wrote up a 5-page letter, and I shipped it out to him at that address, and basically said, "You don't know me,
But
Yeah.
but because people, when they do this sort of thing, they'll bang on the door, they'll hit the doorbell, they'll pick up the phone. You don't know me, but I didn't want to get into somebody's face like that. I wanted to give them time
Right.
to work through things. So I created a letter and I sent it to my brother Rod, who has since passed from his dementia, but I got to spend time with him
Oh.
twice.
oh, good.
And got that through the door. And he was not in shape mentally to understand this letter, what was in it, but his wife did. She opens the package. She's looking through this thing. Her sister is there at the same time. They both end up in their chairs sobbing with this thing in front of them, because that older brother, another clump of 6 siblings that was with wife 2/4, because my mom was wife number 3.
Mhm.
They'd always thought that I was out there, that there was somebody out there. Because they'd heard, won't get into a lot of deep detail, but they'd heard little blips from their mothers about, well, there might be a kid in Jersey.
Right.
Mhm.
My father always denied that there was a kid in Jersey. I did not exist. This is how I start the book. Apparently I didn't exist to this guy. But they all had this feeling that was out there, and they even did some looking. But they couldn't imagine that in her anger and her upset that my mother would keep the guy's last name. But that was just a part of who she was and how she felt about things back in the 50s. And you did this and you did this.
Now,
and
were your parents married at all, or
6 months.
6 months? Okay, so they were actually married.
We're actually married, and they didn't have to. With my older brother, they got married 7 months before he came along. So yeah, they had to. With my mother, that wasn't the case.
My parents sort of had to. They got married in August. I was born in October. You do the math.
I stink at math, so don't worry about it. But they felt there was somebody else out there, but they didn't know how to go about and how to look, especially because I had the same last name. They just didn't figure on it. So my letter coming through that mailbox to them just opened up a whole new piece of the world for all of them. They could have looked at me and said, oh, here's another one of Dad's terrible mistakes. I didn't know what was going to happen. If I was going to be shut out. I was going to say, thank you, go away. We don't want to hear about this. Good luck to you, but you're not in the fact. Anything could have happened. They opened the doors wide to me and rushed to embrace me and pull me in and give me a place, give me that family. They were really delightful in the beginning years of this adventure. Some things have kind of fallen aside. Two of my brothers have died anyway. One of my brothers I've never spoken to. I've been assured by these other family members, that's just him. It's not you, that's just him. So, okay.
Does he have any relationship with any of your sisters?
I've got, there's a back and forth. There's an email-y, Facebook-y kind of thing kind of back and forth. I don't have a strong contact with any of them for some deep reasons having to do with the book and some other things. But they're all different people. One of them is I would never share a voting booth with her, but she's delightful and very warm and open with me. Another's got her own reason to be fussy. I haven't spoken to her in a year. Another is in Maine, an older sister who has her dementia problems, but I speak to her on the phone every so often. I was about to go visit her and COVID hit, and I still haven't done that this year. I will be going up to Maine to see and embrace my older sister.
Well, so how much of your research was legwork? Was you going and reaching out to these people? I mean, and how much of it was technology? I mean, did you use Ancestry at all, for instance?
I didn't.
You don't have to answer that one now that I think about it, but I mean,
yeah,
it's up to you.
I didn't sign up for genealogical sites because I wasn't going to be that serious. I was just a plain detective following the leads, but I wasn't going to dive in that deep. But in my own ways, I still dove in that deep. I was looking at manifests on shipping records. I was talking to little small town clerks in different places. When I was illustrating that thing about my dad and his first marriage, I was on the phone with a clerk in Waco. And she went down to put me on hold, went down to the basement because all of the old records from the 1940s were still on 3x5 cards in a filing cabinet somewhere. And she comes back to the phone and, yes, so you're talking about Burton Mason and this other woman. Yes, they were, I have the card here. They were married in Waco on such and such a date. Well, okay, there's my father. I've got him placed in Waco, Texas. And I got the time. Oh, and by the way, let's see. 1, 2, 3. My older brother was born 7 months. Way to go, Bert. Okay. So
doing the math.
It was talking to people. It was grabbing clerks and a fire marshal in Louisiana.
Didn't become Branch Davidians, did they?
Not that close. No. So it was use of technology. It was looking up stuff. It was looking at newspaper archives by the dozens, because when my grandfather was shot, he was national news. He was on 60 Minutes in 1974. He was in magazine. He was in the Saturday Evening Post and Conyers because his killing was a First Amendment case. He was only the second broadcaster, news reporter to be killed over the Second Amendment, over freedom of the press in this country. So he was pretty much a national thing. So there was a lot of stuff everywhere in terms of the research, but without signing on to genealogical sites. And yet I still managed to find out from one part of my father's family that I can trace it back into the 1600s and the reign of Edward II or something like that. I do have a couple of blips, not really my interest, but it's
there's all kinds of angles to your story. It's like, who would even, I mean, there are people that probably would be completely stunned to know that there were U-boats off the coast of New England.
I was talking to somebody this morning about that who didn't know that part of the wartime history. That, yes, off of New Jersey and off of New England, people would come out in the morning and they'd see the smoke 5 miles offshore of Rhode Island, where some tanker trying to get to Boston had gotten torpedoed.
Wow.
And the German submarine that my father had gone after, which is that story of that in a national magazine, is what got him on TV, probably.
Mm-hmm.
That was the last U-boat sunk by Americans in the war. 3 days later, Germany capitulated.
Yeah, there was a battle, the battle of Point Judith.
Mm-hmm.
Point Judith.
My father dove down on that site off of Rhode Island.
Yeah, the battle. I mean, that's something that's complete. You know, I'm kind of a amateur World War II buff, and I'd never heard of that. You know, it never occurred to me that that this had happened. So I mean, that along with your grandfather's story and people that you were associated with, unbeknownst to you until recent years. I mean, it's a remarkable story.
It's weird. It's odd because lots of people find new people. They find their families through one mechanism or another, and they're just regular folks.
Right.
But if my dad and my grandfather had been salesmen, if one of them had worked in a feed store, if one of them had been a pharmacist assistant, if one of them had been a high school teacher, they would have been just, okay, here are these folks living their lives. But my father, he was a reporter getting killed by a dirty cop. My dad, having 7 marriages and all these stuff, and in and out of jail and going through this and that, and he gets to be on a TV game show, which gets him a carton of cigarettes and a couple of $100, and he thinks it's going to give him wide fame and fortune for his adventures, which it doesn't. And my brother being the homicide cop, there's hardly anybody who's regular in this crowd. So I actually felt odd in writing up the story and please stand up. If I just come to you folks here for dinner, or if I've been in any kind of a setting and said, I got this great story, it'll be a great movie, it'll be a great book. Well, this happens. He finds his father on a TV show. The grandfather is this guy gets murdered, and this other guy does this. This guy's a diver down Nazi subs down the
LBJ.
Detective and
LBJ.
Johnson, the agent, the producer, the whoever was it. Stop right there. No, wait a minute. That's just, you can't pile on all this stuff into one story. Right. Totally unbelievable.
Most people go into Ancestry.
There we go. One story.
They probably think that they're going to be, I'm going to find out my great-great-grandfather was Daniel Boone, or, the reason my grandfather's middle name is Tecumseh is because we got a bloodline back to the.
Yeah, my grandmother's great uncle was John Tecumseh Blevins.
But the likelihood
of that, if that means anything or not.
The likelihood of even one of the things that happened in the tree of your family, in that family tree, is like,
wow. Do you know for sure your father was divorced before the next marriage?
Considering this guy, the possibilities of bigamy somewhere along the way would be, that figures. But with the information that I received from some of my siblings and the paperwork research that I did, the answer is no. He quickly jumped from one marital situation to the next. His fifth wife died in a horrible mansion fire in Covington, Louisiana, which is north of New Orleans. When one of my brothers was 10 years old, he died of AIDS when he was 25 back in the 90s. So no connection there. Well, of course, a connection. I never got to know the guy, but he was out of life specter by then. But he would, 6 months later, he was married again. So he was a guy who liked to be married, who liked to be in his relationships, who liked creating kids and all of that, until they got underfoot.
Yeah. Where did he go for these divorces?
I'm sorry?
Where did he go for all these divorces? Vegas, Mexico?
Whatever was local.
Yeah.
A couple of them in Ohio. Yeah. But whatever was basically available.
Yeah. Well, so did you? What I was getting at is if when you watch him on To Tell the Truth, and you read the article in Newsweek, and you saw what he did with the ocean archaeology, or what would they call that, reclamation of the wrecks and things like that. Did you get any kind of curiosity at all about more curiosity about what type of man he was, or trying to find something about him that humanized him more to you, and it maybe brought him, like, for instance, when he was on the show, the thing I noticed is they were so fixated on the military man, thinking that he was the guy because he was fit, he looked like he was probably the guy. And then the other guy on the other end who ran the
Dude Ranch.
The Dude Ranch, they spent time with him. There's only like one question for your father.
A couple, but
yeah.
Number two, are you going to hold still for that business about the lanolin keeping the wool dry inside there? You go along with that, number two.
Yes, I do. Lanolin. Well, there we are. Once again, we've come to the end of our wool.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't
spend a lot of time on.
Is that a lost opportunity? Maybe a lost opportunity to learn a little bit more about him, that maybe was frustrating.
Again, 7 minutes on television, you're not going to accomplish a lot.
Yeah.
But in my 3 years of tracking people down, and then finally talking to my siblings and understanding what their life was like with this guy, because there was a lot to his being a father anyway that was normal and acceptable. Lots of bouncing on the knee, daddy moments. He wasn't Genghis Khan to these kids, but on the other hand, he deserted them a lot. Came back, went away, and came back. He was very difficult in his thing, but he would walk into a room at a party and he would take over. He would just shine up the room. He was just one of those guys where people would gravitate to. He was an immense amount of fun with a terrific sense of humor.
Sociopathic.
He learned at an early age how to say things that would get people to both like him and accept him, and take his word for stuff and do what he wanted them to do. So he had the hallmarks. I don't throw this around lightly when I call him a sociopath. He has the clinical hallmarks of how that sort of person reacts and interacts with other people. So in terms of finding out who the guy was, deep on the inside, I mentioned a question earlier on in our program that I'd carried around for years. What kind of a crappy guy would do this to my mom and me? And in learning about him, I came to one answer. It's not an excuse. It's not a pardon. It's a hypothesis. But here is a guy who saw his mother die in front of him in a car crash because his dad was slippery behind the wheel when he was 4 years old, who gets sent off to a military school when he's 10 years old out of state because the new stepmother just can't handle him, who finds himself at age 16 in the Merchant Marine during the Second World War in the Pacific, and then going to France after D-Day, a kid swabbing decks and making coffee on the Liberty ships, the container ships, the supply ships, waiting to get punched by a German torpedo. He's 16. He gets his girlfriend pregnant when he's 19, has to marry the girl. They have a kid. It doesn't work out. They separate. His dad gets killed by a cop in the streets across town from where he's working when he's 21. And then later down the road, has a son, and down the road he meets my mom. Maybe that's so when this happened with my mother when he was 23, maybe that's the kind of guy who would do what he did to me and my mom.
Well,
maybe that kind of a guy with that kind of a life, with what he'd been through. Again, not an excuse, just an hypothesis, but maybe that kind of guy would be crappy enough to split up with my mom after 6 months and leave her with me and deny my existence. Maybe that kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they say that a lot of sociopaths are not so much born as created by childhood trauma. So, I
mean, I doubt that's something you're born with, but you can learn it.
Yeah.
And he apparently did.
Yeah.
And was very well practiced at it. And it brings up, I was talking about this over breakfast with a friend this morning. It's one of those questions that will come up when you're talking to folks, because everybody's got their own experiences. And I know people who have had abusive parents. And the question then comes up, that little philosophical thing you talk about over dessert. Well, who's better off? The person who had an abusive dad, who you never knew what kind of dad he was going to be when he walked through the door, or a mother. You never know who that person's going to be, if they're going to set him off, how delicately you have to operate around the parent, desertion, violence in the home, psychological abuse, whatever. Or what about the person who doesn't have the parent at all, just a blank? Am I better off not having had him in my life, the kind of guy that he was? Or are the siblings better off because, yeah, he was who he was, but at least they had their dad? Who wins? I don't know.
What do you how do you personally feel about that question? Because you had your mom.
That's a push.
I've got what I've got. I have no experience on the other side, so
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I only know that I have what I have. A delightful mother. She's 94 and living in our hometown.
I think Aaron's
great.
Aaron's kids.
My
Aaron's
grandmother
grandkids-
was the finest woman I ever knew.
Aaron's grandkids play baseball, and they all go, and they're very committed to being at the games and making the kids, and reinforcing their passion for baseball, which is really great. But I remember when I played Little League Baseball, there rarely were parents there. Sometimes, there were a few regulars that would come every once in a while, and they'd help out with like batting practice and fielding and stuff like that. But it was not nearly, the presence was not there then the way it seems to be now, at least where I was from. But my dad would come, and occasionally he would come and he would bring some of his like old school flavor down to the ball field. Like if I were pitching, it would be, try to go ahead and dust
At the Little League game.
dust that little girl off the plate on the other team, like throw inside, or like when the kid's trying to steal second.
Attaboy, Phil, you show him.
Right. Tag that kid upside the head. He won't come in way at you again. So that was kind of embarrassing, right? So I thought about that. Now, is it better to have your dad come down and
be a little embarrassing?
And be a little, not just a little embarrassing, but really embarrassing, or all the kids that their parents never came down at all. There were a lot of kids on my Little League team. Their parents never showed up at all. So
not for games, not for practice, nothing.
Yeah. So
I determined early on, young teen years, whenever it happened to get into my psychology. But it wasn't when I was of childbearing age in my 20s or 30s. It was long before that. I determined I was never going to be to my kids what my father had been to me. First of all, missing, but I was always at my kids' games. I was an assistant coach for my kid in Little League, going out to the stuff that going to my son's Boy Scout meetings, because he wanted to be an Eagle Scout just like his old man was. Going to my Girl Scout meetings and watching her on stage at the Performing Arts High School where she went, and just all those kinds of things, those little twigs on the campfire of life. I determined early on I was going to be everything that I should have had with a dad and didn't have.
Right.
So if he left me any kind of a legacy in his absence, I was never going to be like him.
Well, how could you not go? I mean, we don't have children, but if we did, how could you not go to that?
Heck, we'd be willing to go to our friends' kids' games.
Right. We watch the Bananas on the video stream every once in a while.
Oh yeah, my grandson's teams stream on this app called Game Changer, and Phil's able to watch some of them. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You look like you've got grandkids there.
Yeah, two
Yeah.
of them.
Just don't look old enough for. I mean, you look like some guitar player from some old band of mine.
55.
Good for you. I've got a grandson who's 2 years old.
Oh, awesome.
Best thing in the world.
It's
best.
the best.
It's beautiful. All right.
Except for the diaper
Well,
part. Yeah.
You don't
Um,
always have to change those.
I know that. Okay, so I know that part of your
somebody
past,
does, but not always you.
you were on a radio show, or you did a radio show in Philadelphia? Is that right?
I spent my glorious 20s and 30s doing a bunch of different things. I was with a theater here that was a real cutting edge kind of new arts place, which in Philadelphia for many years was the fourth largest market in the country for arts and sports and all kinds of things. In high school, I was the guy while everybody else was dancing or drinking or making out in the corner or something, I was the guy over by the stereo looking at the liner notes on albums. And after 2 years at Rutgers University, I left school and went into Philadelphia to work for what used to be known as an underground newspaper. So I was a music critic. Had a good couple of years there, got to meet a lot of really nice people, spend time with famous people.
You mentioned Aaron looks like the like a guitarist for Foghat or something. So I was wondering, he's a big deadhead. So if he were here, he lost his connection apparently. Deleted.
I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I was trying to find a photograph I took of Jerry Garcia when I spent time with him in 1975.
Take a photo.
It was nice to be able to be that guy, because nobody in my high school did what I did. Nobody in college did what I did. I grew up to be that guy who got to hang around with Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir and the Genesis guys and lots of other.
Yeah, we just
people.
did a episode on Wind and Wuthering, the Genesis album, but Aaron, Keith was just telling us about hanging out with Jerry and Bob Weir and
excellent.
And yeah, it's like he had an opportunity to do that. So I was just curious.
What year was that?
Jerry Garcia, right?
I was mid 70s, late 70s, early 80s. I got to have that experience of being the critic who gets to do exciting stuff. But it was
very cool.
But I was not the guy who chased the new big thing that came. I never reviewed a Led Zeppelin record, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to some folk singer that nobody ever heard of and say, "Oh, check this out. Guy's name, what's his name here? Joe Walsh. You might like him." So I got to spend an afternoon with Marcel Marceau, the great French.
Oh, wow.
I got to spend time with George Carlin before hardly anybody knew who George Carlin was.
That's awesome.
That would be
so. I liked to dig down off of the top 40, away from the known people, or at least before it became known people. I just got more fun out of that.
Yeah.
And just helping to break some people in Philadelphia be their champion. Nobody knew who Monty Python was, and
that was George Carlin's pre-hippie period, I would assume, when he kind of dressed straight.
If you're old enough, you remember him from the old Dean Martin shows in Las Vegas with just looking like a businessman, and then having his revelations that he was in the wrong part of comedy, and became the George that everybody knows and loves.
Right.
Yeah, well, I was born in 66, so, and those two are younger.
You have no idea what I'm talking about then.
Well, I mean, we were exposed. We both, Philip and I, at least. I don't know how I don't know if Aaron's dad was older, but we had older parents. Our parents were in their 30s when they got around to us.
Well, I remember Carlin on the Tonight Show.
Late
That's probably where I
20s,
first saw-
early
Oh,
30s.
I know where I first saw him. He was like one of the first hosts of SNL. He might have been
On
the
the-
first host.
On the first
Yeah,
show.
he
Yeah,
was.
before they'd really formed the format of how the show was going to
Right.
be. He was number one. He came out and did parts of his act.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember that was the first exposure to him. But then from there, I was like, I saw things somehow. Didn't have YouTube back then.
We
But I
always,
saw
we always ran across George Carlin on TV, on the news.
he was kind of
You know,
the
Johnny
He had
Carson.
all the HBO specials when cable first started. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron used to be able to do like what was the first, the 7 words you can't say on television.
Oh, I could do about the extended list. I could still do a whole lot of them, and we'd need a special explicit tag for that.
Which nowadays is almost boring, depending on what cable channel you happen to be looking at.
Right,
That's true.
right. Thanks to cable.
But still, it had a poetry to it. You know, just
yeah.
that many words in succession. Well,
I was really lucky in my 20s to be the guy that had that sort of life, and some of it served me well.
Yeah.
Gives me things to talk about with friends around the dinner table.
I don't know.
I got to see the Grateful Dead with Jerry 7 times, and probably the post Jerry projects. I know I saw the other ones twice. I saw Dead and Company twice. I saw The Dead.
Mhm.
So yeah, 5 other times. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's Fish that I really catch. I've been to, I think it's 23 Fish shows now.
Well, many
And
more.
and everyone sounds different.
Everyone's different.
Well, I usually try to get a feel for this. I don't know. We do what we call the Elite 8 bracket at the end of our episodes, but I'm not sure this episode has been so thoughtful and interesting.
It's a little bit of fun tidbit.
Well,
at
it
the end.
requires, everybody has to be in, and I'm going to ask Keith, do you want to participate in our Elite 8 bracket of game shows?
You just pick one. You pick one over the other. It's just a preference.
If you're going to give me 2 and say go with 1 and see how it brackets down, yeah, sure.
It's exactly what it is.
All right, here we go. The Elite 8 classic game shows. Our first matchup in round 1, Tell the Truth versus Jeopardy. Keith?
Well, I'm going to go with Jeopardy.
What about you, Aaron?
And I always loved Jeopardy.
All right, well, that means Jeopardy moves on. Keith, what would you have chosen?
Honestly, I'm going with To Tell the Truth. I enjoyed when I watched it when I was younger.
Well, here we go. Truth or Consequences versus The Price is Right.
Truth or Consequences wasn't always Bob Barker.
I'll go with Truth or Consequences just because they named a town after me.
How about you, Aaron?
I'll go with the New Mexico logic there. Truth or Consequences.
Okay, so Truth or Consequences again moves on. But so the third matchup of the first round is Liars Club versus the Joker's Wild.
You know what? I did like the Liars Club.
Aaron?
Yeah.
I'm going Joker's Wild.
So that's Liars Club.
All right.
Liars Club. All right. Is What's My Line versus You Bet Your Life. I'm gonna lead this one off.
I'm going Groucho.
Closest that the Beatles ever got to an American game show was What's My Line. So for Beat Best's sake, I'm going with that.
Okay.
I'm going You Bet Your Life.
Oh, you bet. All right, so that brings us to our final 4 here. Jeopardy versus Truth or Consequences, and we'll start with Aaron.
Jeopardy.
Lise?
Jeopardy.
All right, so Jeopardy's already moved on.
As it
and
should.
Liars Club versus You Bet Your Life.
Well, I'll go with You Bet Your Life.
Lise?
Groucho.
Groucho would have been great on the Liars Club, I think, but yeah, Groucho. Jeopardy versus You Bet Your Life.
Groucho.
Aaron?
Jeopardy.
All right, so we come down to Keith's decision on the winner of our Elite 8, Jeopardy versus You Bet Your Life.
Will the best answer please stand up?
Jeopardy.
There we go. Final answer.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end the proceedings here
Mm-hmm.
today. We really appreciate you coming, Keith. We really enjoyed this discussion, and
I know we discussed it at the beginning, but
very cool story. Very cool memoir.
I have one final great way to bring your program to a close.
Excellent.
And it's right
that's
here.
what we were about
That's
to
what we're
ask
coming
you.
up to.
Where do we find the book?
Don't have to ask.
You can find it at pleasestandupmason.com. You can go direct to Amazon for Please Stand Up, to Barnes and Noble. But if you go to the website at pleasestandupmason.com, you can click through to getting the book there. But there's a lot of great information, a lot of interesting photos, and other kinds of stuff that are involved with. So that's a good starting point. But it's available, it's out there, and with any luck, 5 or 6 years from now, when it turns up as a movie on Amazon, if I get lucky with it, you could say, I remember that guy.
We'll have you back on for the movie.
Make a really good indie story, like an indie film.
When you become
like something more personal, like Charing Cross Road, because the story kind of reminds me of that a little bit. I
don't know what that is.
I'm not going to turn myself into a screenwriter the way I turn myself into a book writer. So it's a completely different way of telling the story. It needs different ways to grab the audience and bring the audience along. Nothing at all like the conversational storytelling tone of the book. So that's a different world. Other people will have to handle that. I have to put myself in other people's hands. I have no idea how blockbustery or how small and thoughtful the thing will eventually become. The ball is just starting to roll on that now. So
nice.
Somewhere down the road, who knows? I'll find out when you do.
All right. We'll look forward to that.
Best of luck with it. Good luck.
I really appreciate it. Again, I appreciate you bringing me into your living rooms, where you and your audience hang out on a regular basis, and an opportunity to talk about the story and about the book. And be sure to visit the website at pleasestandupmason.com and buy the book, Make Me Rich, Handsome, and Wealthy. I'm only 72. I still got some room I can work it.
Oh, yeah.
We have social.
Twitter.
Yeah, pod.
Instagram.
Yeah, pod.
Facebook.
Yeah, pod. So let us know. Hit us back. Have a great week.